late night, they ain't getting no rest. Work so hard, people think I'm obsessed. Cream at the crop, won't settle for no less. Headed to the top, arena so focused. Yeah, gorilla of the jungle, I've been beating on my chest. I learned from the struggle, it was hard, just a test.
Hey guys, and welcome back. So today we're going to jump into the altcoin side of things, take a look, update some of the charts, some of the coins that I'm more bullish on. I did recently announce that I did kind of sell some alts that I wasn't really that convicted in. So it is important when you're holding things for a medium to longer term potentially that you really do have that conviction in the asset itself. Without conviction, then there is kind of no really underlying trade there, and you're really just kind of trading based on hype and speculation. So while that can work out a lot of the times, we really want to kind of find a nice happy medium between the fundamentals, the technicals, as well as that hype or that narrative that helps drive price. So we're going to flip over to our look here at our ETF. So this is the Bitcoin spot ETF. We frequently watch this just to make sure, we want to see inflows coming in. That means money's coming into Bitcoin and not out of it. But what I've noticed recently is we had this kind of period here where outflows kind of dominated. We went in that downwards chop solidation phase. So that's just choppy sideways / downwards price action. And then we saw some nice big inflows here. This was billions of dollars. I think it worked out to about $8 or $9 billion over the span of a couple weeks. And we saw Bitcoin ripping from the lows up to new all-time highs. So now we are starting to see some outflows again. But what I noticed here when we flip to our Ethereum ETF, this is pretty interesting. Look at this. So where we started to see outflows in Ethereum, we were seeing inflows in Bitcoin. And where we're seeing outflows in Bitcoin, we're starting to see the inflows in Ethereum. And Ethereum also bouncing off the lows here. Still struggling, when you look at Ethereum, Bitcoin, you look at altcoins, look at Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin is still the big gorilla right now, still attracting the majority of the liquidity. But this is an interesting shift to note, to see this accumulation of the Ethereum ETF that could be in anticipation of a potential decision from the SEC this summer regarding ETF staking. So if we see the SEC allow ETFs to engage in staking activities and then pay their investors the staking rewards via a dividend, that's going to make Ethereum a lot more attractive to a lot of investors, especially institutional investors looking to kind of earn yield while also capitalizing on the price appreciation of the asset. So that's something we're going to continue watching here, but just an interesting little anecdote there. We're going to flip over to USDT dominance. This is because when we look at USDT dominance, it gives us a representation of how stable coins are being valued in the market. We can take a quick look at it compared to TOTAL3, and just to show you that representation where when we see USDT dominance pumping, we generally see altcoins dumping here. So it's kind of this inverse relationship. Same thing over here, USDT dominance dumping, altcoins pumping, altcoins dumping, USDT dominance getting that relief rally here. And then here we have again that just dump from USDT dominance where altcoins were able to get a bit of a bid here. It did kind of go to a lower high though, so that's interesting to note. We'll pay attention to that. I'll just get rid of this for now, but just to show you that comparison, that relationship between the two and why we pay attention to USDT dominance. So similar to what we saw in some of these prior patterns here, we kind of had a bottom put in. This was a higher low here, where this instance was actually a lower low, but we did manage to regain that trend line here, put in the higher low on the weekly chart, so that high time frame chart, holding that Fibonacci golden zone very well. The only difference that I see right now is we're actually underneath this 200-week moving average, whereas over here, we were above that 200-week moving average, so a little difference there. Same thing here. We kind of deviated a little bit below the 200-day moving average, whereas over here we held above it a lot stronger. You can see we didn't even come to that 618 Fibonacci. We actually just came down to this 0.5 before the risk off mode took control. This rocketed to the upside, and alts probably got decimated in that time. So we need to pay attention here. We want to see USDT dominance breaking down. The most ideal and most bullish case scenario for our altcoins would be looking at coming into resistance and actually losing it and breaking down. So we'll take our Fibonacci retracement tool. We're going to look for a resistance level here. So same thing, when you look for support, you're going from the low to the high. And when you're looking for resistance, you go from the high to the low. So high to the low, we see the 618 to 786 golden zone, that 200-week moving average right in here around 5.75%. So that's going to be a decent little near-term resistance level for USDT dominance. We could see price come up into here, get rejected. Maybe we come here, we put in a lower high, we lose this trend line, and we continue to lower targets. This is going to be the most bullish case scenario for a real alt season, a sustainable alt season, not these little pumps that we're getting, you know, and then ultimately just retracing while Bitcoin dominance continues its macro uptrend. We want to see this break down, and we want to see it durably break down on a high time frame downtrend. But for now, we are holding these lows. We're in that technical higher low on the weekly. We're above the VRVP point of control. We're holding this trend line right now, which has previously acted as support multiple times throughout the cycles. So we need to just pay attention. Do we get this continuation to the upside, or do we ultimately just kind of come back, break down below this trend line, and we get our alt season? So paying attention to USDT dominance, let's take a look at our indicators compared to this prior instance over here. So we see RSI kind of right around 45. Now it's also kind of similar to what we saw over here. So about 50 RSI on this retest here. Makes sense that we came down a little bit more because price came down further into that Fibonacci support. When we're looking at the MACD, we saw that we had this cross rate here at the lows, similar here. So right around the lows, we had this cross. Looking at the DMI, same thing. We see that the blue trend was dominant, broke below the red ADX line, but still the dominant trend here. Same thing here, blue above red, broke below ADX, but still curled up as the dominant trend on the directional movement index. The thing I see here is the vortex indicator. So we have had a bearish cross of this vortex indicator. We need to pay attention to that. If this continues to push up and the blue positive line goes down, that tells me the bearish trend is kind of taking control here for USDT dominance. We want to see the bearish trend take control because we want it to break down. We don't want to see the bullish trend because that means that risk off is kind of playing out. People are selling altcoins, going into stable coins. So based on the indicators, it is very similar to back here. The only difference I see is the vortex indicator looks a little bit different, and we didn't quite come down as far. So just paying attention to that. We're going to flip over to Bitcoin dominance here. Yeah, sorry about that. So we'll flip over to Bitcoin dominance. And we see here what we have. We are up following this wedge here, kind of broke down, back tested it now, holding it on the weekly for now, but we're still a lower high on the weekly. When we take a look at the daily chart here, we can kind of see another little, I consider this kind of a bearish pattern where we got heavy resistance right up here. I do think that this could be a good area to break down from if we get that risk on signal in the market. So a still macro uncertainty out there. You know, everything's just kind of V-shaped off the bottom, but we're right into resistance. We're right into previous highs, and we need to be aware of this because although we're uptrending on the daily, the weekly is that lower high. So we need to pay attention to that. And same thing here, we also need to pay attention to our indicators. We can kind of see the MACD losing momentum. RSI is trending up still, so that's good. You know, we could maintain this uptrend for now. And the bullish trend remains dominant here on the vortex and the directional movement index, but it looks like we could be losing some momentum here. So watch these two lines. If we see the orange negative line start to curl up and the blue positive line down, that's that signal that the bearish trend is taking control, and we might be due for a bit of relief in altcoins. We're going to look at TOTAL3 now. Another update here. Sorry about that. My keyboard is messing up today. Yeah, so TOTAL3 looking pretty good. Although we're downtrending a little bit on the daily, it's not to be surprised about. That's why I say wait for confirmation on the weekly charts, because the weekly is the most important, the high time frame. We saw it. We came back to that 0.5. I still think we could come down to this area down here, tag this trend line before we continue to the upside, and then my sell target would be up here in this liquidity resistance pool, whether you're taking profits or just securing positions with a stop loss up there. But there is the potential for something like this to play out as well. We've talked about this potential scenario. We saw this basically breakout, straight up run kind of to new highs, come back, bounce up, kind of wick right above the 200-day moving average, got rejected, and that was that downtrend bear market. So that could also play out here. We need to pay attention to that. That's going to be the risk. If we break this trend line up through here, then that's a very bad signal and tells me that we might be due to repeat kind of a move similar to over here. We have also a similar kind of setup on the RSI with the downsloping peaks. The MACD, a little bit different here. We had downsloping on the MACD in the prior cycle. This cycle we've actually got that upsloping trend line. So just the downsloping peaks on the RSI to worry about right now. We see here though that the directional movement index, that orange line, is starting to regain momentum and get above. Same thing with the vortex indicator. So coming back, retesting that lower positive line and curling back up. So we need to pay attention to this because again, the bearish trend could be taking control here. TOTAL3 looks all right, but it still needs to do some work. I think we would come down to that 618786 scenario and then look at others dominance here. So we drew this kind of price action and it's continuing to play out. When we look at the daily, you know, not looking good. This isn't the price action you want to see. Bear flag, breakdown, back test, rejection. Tried to put in a bottom here, put in the higher high, but wasn't able to hold and ultimately kept trending to the downside. That's why I say weekly confirmation is really important, because if you entered low cap altcoins, you know, on this move right here, you're already down on that trade. Or if you chased it up here, then you're down even a decent little bit. So that's why I say pay attention to the higher time frame for confirmation. You can look for early entries on the daily chart, but we really want that confirmation on the weekly. And in terms of momentum, the bearish trend is dominant. We are kind of getting a little bit of relief on the MACD and RSI, coming down to these lower oversold targets. But the vortex and directional movement index just tell me, you know, the bearish trend is still dominant. And look at all of this resistance we have up above here. So we've got the VRVP point of control. We've got all of these moving averages stacked against us. We've got this bear flag resistance. This will continue to act as resistance until we break above it. We've got a previous swing resistance high, so this pivot high zone here, and we've got multiple sell order blocks here via the Lux Algo sell or order block detector. So a lot of resistance for others dominance. It's going to take a little bit of work for them to really kind of climb out of this and see where they're going from there. So now we're going to take a look at some of the altcoins that I am more bullish on. We're going to look at the weekly charts and we're going to plot our levels here. So same thing that we always do. We've got this move here with Tau just kind of really pumping out off the lows here, doing very well, but nothing goes up straight forever. You guys know my thoughts. We come back looking for that sub $300 entry on Tau from that 618 down to that 786. We've also got a massive liquidity pool down here and this previous swing breakout. So this is resistance, this is support, looking to buy in the Fibonacci zone or down at this lower horizontal support for Tau. We're going to take a look at Fetch. That's so kind of some of the coins that I am focusing on are narrative specific. So these ones are AI kind of specific. So I like Fetch, I like Tau, I like Virtual, I like AIOZ. This is another one. We've got our Fibonacci already pulled. We're looking at the 60 cent down to about 50 cent target for Fetch for an additional entry. We're going to look over at AIOZ now. We see here AIOZ is actually a bit better value coming back to that 618. It is going to need to do a little bit of work. because of the way TOTAL3 and others dominance currently look, then I do think we could come down to these lower levels. If we come back to a 25-cent AIOZ, I may look to add to my position because I think that could be decent value there. But ultimately, we also recognize there's a lot of liquidity here. There's a lot of support. So a 10-cent entry could happen in AIOZ, you know, and if that does happen, we're going to lose this low here, and that's going to scare me a little bit. So if we come down to the 786, I'll likely enter my position. I might have to protect it with a stop loss below support down here to ensure that we're not in this downtrend movement. So that's AIOZ. We're going to take a look at virtual here. So virtual USDT. I like the Bybit. So we see here we've got this swing breakout. Let's take our Fibonacci tool from the low to the high. Looking at the 618 to 786. So you're looking at about a 90-cent to $1.25 would be a decent accumulation zone for virtual. This one moves really aggressively when it does move. So we've caught some pretty amazing trades. We're going to look to do the same. We already have a virtual position. You know, our average is about $1.37, I believe. And we've also taken some pretty successful swing trades in this asset as well. So paying attention to virtual, that's another one I'm still really bullish on. So those are kind of my AI picks, you know, virtual, Tau, Fetch AI, AIOZ. Those are the ones that I'm kind of more bullish on when it comes to AI or kind of the AI narrative. When it comes to RWA or real world assets, Ondo is one of the ones that I'm more bullish on. Looking at the daily chart, we are bouncing from this trend line here, but we have a lot of resistance up here and all the support is down here under this trend line. So that kind of scares me a little bit. You know, we ideally don't want to lose these trend lines that have been acting as support. If we look at our indicators here on the daily, let's kind of see what's going on. So oversold on the MACD, didn't quite get to oversold on the RSI, and curling over there, and bearish trend is dominant right now on the DMI and the Vortex indicator. So when it comes to Ondo right now, I'm not really interested. You know, I have a position, but I'm not adding to that position right now just based on the technical factors. If we take a look at a few different, we can take a cycle Fibonacci. So pulling our Fibonacci tool from the low to the high of the cycle and looking for that 786 entry. And look at this, a previous pivot support, and there's a liquidity pool in here and the 786 Fibonacci. So if we come back to 60 cents for Ondo, I'm going to be adding to my position down there. And we can also look at kind of the slightly lower time frame Fibonacci retracement. We're going to see that we're already kind of past that 786 on this move here. So definitely looking to add to the position down towards 60 cents. That being said, you know, adding in this zone down here under 75 cents on a DCA basis is not the worst thing for Ondo if you believe that altcoins are going to get that leg up. Just based how TOTAL3 and others dominance look kind of right now, you know, I'm not positive we're going to get that leg up immediately, so I'm not really rushing to get into things. So another one we're going to look at is Chainlink here. Chainlink is another one that I'm pretty bullish on when it comes to RWA. If we come to this area here, sub $10, I'm going to start DCAing back into Chainlink. We can see, look at this zone in through here. So this is just massive, crazy consolidation for Chainlink, acting as resistance and then support, and then here we broke out, we came back, we back tested it, we held it as support. So looking for a similar thing here. This is the accumulation zone for Chainlink, anywhere from $5, kind of sub $5 up to sub $10. That's what I'm looking for Chainlink. Let's take a look at a few more. We're going to look at Sui. Sui, another good one here. Let's see, we've already got our Fibonacci drawn. We've broken out of this downtrend. We're looking at a 618 to 786 entry, closer to $2.70 or down to about $2.25. So Sui, we can look at an entry kind of there. We're going to look at Solana. So a bunch of different coins. We've got some L1s, we've got some AI coins, we've got some RWA. So we've got a good mix of kind of investments here. Let's take our Fibonacci tool. Same thing we normally do. Looking at that entry for Solana, sub 130 down to 115 roughly is that Fibonacci golden zone. And we also see we've got this buy order here as well as this pivot support right here as well. So looking to kind of add to Solana here if we get that opportunity, and then riding that to the upside. Let's take a look at our public investment tracker just quickly and see if we missed any ones that we really want to cover. So I pretty much I sold a lot of these. I mentioned it in the video yesterday. It looks like we have pretty much covered all the coins that I have continued to hold. We're going to take a quick look at this KTA. This is a new coin. It's about 3 weeks old. You know, I have to give it some attention just because a lot of people are talking about it. But keep in mind, this is brand new. It doesn't have very much price action. This thing's a few weeks old. And look at this. It's basically gone up. It consolidated. And we're getting this crazy pump here. So people were chasing multiple times. Like, this is why you don't chase. Things pump and they come back to the Fibonacci, and they pump and they come back to that Fibonacci. So what do? We just pull our Fibonacci, same thing as always, and we're looking here. This is going to be my potential you know, I might dip my toes into this down here if we get that 618 retracement back towards $1. Otherwise, you know, it's just too new, you know, not really worth the risk to me, in my opinion, with the way that other the altcoin indexes are looking. But when it comes to the indicators, you know, we are seeing, yeah, so this isn't good. We're getting bearish divergence here on the price action, and our bullish trend is losing momentum. So that's why I say don't chase this one. Just wait for a bit better of an entry. I think we come back to this region down here, similar to what we did here and similar to what we did over here. So that's it for today. Just a quick update on our altcoin indexes, a few of my favorite altcoin picks covering different narratives, as well as this newer asset to keep our eye on. Maybe we look and we can get a little bit of a position in here, but as always, manage your risk, be patient, and execute the strategy. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.